What's going on, everyone? This is Joseph from Lake Perris State Recreation Area, and I am one of the park interpretive specialists here for our park. So you may be wondering what I am doing here at the park while most of California is sheltered in place because of COVID-19. And part of the mission of California State Parks is to provide for the health, inspiration, and education of all Californians. And so we want to continue that mission virtually with you as we can, as much as we can during this crisis and this uncertain time. So today we're going to be going on a virtual tour, and we're going to be looking at one of the unique animals that lives here at Lake Perris, and that is the rattlesnake. Before we get into the rattlesnake, its features and its adaptations, we do want to mention some safety things as well. Just as if you were here at Lake Perris, we would go over safety. Here we are on a virtual tour, hike, whatever it may be in the future. We want to make sure we go through safety as well. So number one, please make sure that you are washing your hands as much as possible with soap and water, preferably for 20 to 30 seconds. Number two, please remember to maintain social distancing. So that means only going out when absolutely necessary. If you're out here on the park trails, make sure that you're keeping distance away from people, but most importantly, you're staying up to all regulations in your local cities and counties as well in order to keep everyone safe. We'll get through this together. Now, the other thing is to remember, please, to avoid sneezing, coughing out in the open. Make sure you cough in your elbow like this. Finally, you can remember to disinfect surfaces as much as possible. So all these things I've been doing today here at work, and I would recommend and commend everyone to please do these as well to keep our state healthy, and we can hopefully all come back to these programs in person in the near future. So let's go ahead and get started, guys. We are doing our very first virtual tour, and this is on the rattlesnake. So I have some really neat pictures to show you guys. So the rattlesnake, as you guys may know, is one of the most feared animals in California and perhaps in the entire world. It has a really bad reputation. And I think a lot of that stems because people don't understand the unique attributes of this rattlesnake, how to behave around that rattlesnake. And so we're going to look at today how the rattlesnake is particularly adapted to survive and thrive here at Lake Perris and in Southern California in general. We're going to look at first the rattlesnake itself and the landscapes that they live in, the different species. Number two, we're going to look at the rattlesnakes, their eating habits, their venom, how they sense the world around them. And then number three, we're going to look at rattlesnakes, the rattle itself, and how other species can use that rattle sound to mimic themselves as rattlesnakes in order to be protected. So it's going to be a lot of fun. So hope you hang tight towards the whole end of this program. I'm going to be showing pictures, playing some videos, playing some audio. I've got some really neat rattlesnake skins and equipment here that I'm going to be showing to you guys. So stay tuned, guys. It's going to be pretty cool. So I'm going to try to go ahead and open up my screen here with you guys. And this is going to be our first screen here. Hope you guys can see this pretty well. This is a slide on the three types of rattlesnakes that we have here in this region of Southern California. So kind of central Riverside County, here on the west side of the San Jacinto Mountains. So up top, you see the red diamondback rattlesnake. This is the most common rattlesnake at Lake Perris. I've seen a couple already this year. They're just starting to come out as temperatures start to warm up. They were coming out more last month when temperatures were abnormally warm, but they're going to be coming out nonetheless very shortly. So that's the red diamondback rattlesnake. Now, a neat thing about the red diamondback rattlesnake is that it is actually a species of special concern. So that pretty much means it's not quite an endangered species, but scientists and the Department of Fish and Wildlife are monitoring the species to see if it might merit being on the state endangered species list at some point. And it's mostly due to habitat loss as development continues in the Inland Empire. So thankfully, it's here at Lake Perris, though, and it has a really great home. And it's really a beautiful snake. Bright red color, got that kind of a zebra pattern all the way at the end of its tail. Scientists think that's a distraction mechanism as it tries to get away. And then, of course, the diamonds. Now, the guy here at the bottom I have, this is a Southern Pacific rattlesnake. The Southern Pacific rattlesnake is our most venomous kind of rattlesnake in this part of Southern California. You head out to the desert, they are more venomous, but here in the coastal regions, this is as dangerous as they get. So he's about 5 times more venomous than the red diamondback rattlesnake, believe it or not. This one you're going to find in the coast. You're going to find in the coastal sage scrub, in the chaparral areas, closer to San Diego, Orange County, LA. And then you're also going to find it up higher in the mountains. So kind of like Idlewild, Big Bear, Angeles Oaks, Forest Falls. That area is where you're going to mainly find the southern Pacific rattlesnake. It likes slightly cooler temperatures than where we are here in the heart of Riverside County. And then finally, on the very bottom, we have a speckled rattlesnake. So speckled rattlesnake is pretty special to see if you see one of these guys. They're pretty rare. They live up in boulder areas, real rocky areas, and they blend in real well, as you can see in this picture here. They're really an amazing species, but I personally have not seen them, but I know of others who have. So just keep an eye out. They typically like a little bit cooler weather as well. All right, so let's check out our next slide, what the rattlesnakes look like in terms of their habitats. So you can see in this image, we have pictures of 3 different kinds of habitats. So up on the top right corner, we have the coastal sage scrub habitat, or this is actually at Lake Perris or near Lake Perris. This is the Riversidean sage scrub. So this is sparse sages and other kinds of reverse deciduous plants that grow together, and small grasses that grow in between them. Nothing gets real large. Everything's about 3 to 4 feet at max on their height, and they're spaced out, right? And as you can see, oftentimes there is real rocky terrain as we have around here. So that's the terrain and the vegetation areas we have at Lake Perris. Now on the left-hand side of the screen, you'll see that we have the desert regions, and these snakes can also live out closer to Cabazon, Palm Springs, and some of the more arid areas of Southern California. And then finally here at the bottom, we'll find them in the chaparral mountains areas, the grasslands, and also the mid-range coniferous forests. So this is a shot up on Highway 38 near Big Bear. And this kind of shows that whole elevational range where they can be seen. So believe it or not, they can be seen from sea level, and I've seen reports all the way up to 9,000 feet. So they get around. Different species certainly are not picky about where they live in our area. All right, so let's look at how a rattlesnake senses the world. So I love this slide. This is an absolutely amazing diorama that someone put together. And it really demonstrates how rattlesnakes perceive the world. So rattlesnakes are part of a snake group that's called a pit viper. So this also includes cobras and cottonmouths, which are other famous venomous snakes. And a pit viper is determined by the 2 pits that it has underneath its eyes. So you can see the green snake right there. He's got a little hole under just above his eyes, but kind of above where his nose would be, so to speak. And those are called pits, and they allow him to view not only in with his eyes and to sense the world with his tongue, but to see things, as it were, or to sense things more properly in a thermal view. So by viewing the thermal heat of other species. So we can see with our eyes, right? And as you can see, we see a rat as that top picture there. That's the human view. Now, a pit viper or a rattlesnake can see that same rat in a couple of different ways. So its vision's not that great. It sees a couple of feet in front of it, but really not that much beyond that. As you can see, it relies mainly on its other ways to sense prey. So its odor molecules. You guys notice that snakes, they stick out their tongue like this, right? They have their forked tongue. And so that tongue actually has odor molecule receptacles on their ends. So they're able to smell in the air with their tongue. So the reason they're forked and the reason they put them out like this, right, is because one of their forks is smelling kind of the right side of their area and the other one is smelling the left side. They're coming together into their mouth and sending that signal back to their brain to kind of come up with an odor molecular picture of what they're seeing. So that's a cool way that they rely on sensing the world. Finally, vibrations. So rattlesnakes don't hear per se like we hear. that they hear via a network of vibrations. So on their lower jaw, they have a special sensory organ that's able to detect vibrations coming towards them. So it's kind of like you might want to think of it, a primitive form of an ear, right? And so they can hear in sonar how far something is. They can determine if it's a threat or not, and it particularly helps them when they hear with the bottom part of their jaw, right? Because snakes are usually on the ground, if prey is coming their way. And then finally, as pit vipers, as members of this group of snakes, they can see things as a hunter might see through a heat lens. So they can see the vital organs, or they can perceive the vital organs, such as the brain, the heart, the main intestinal areas, as red, you could say, or more hot, at least in our perception of how they see. And this helps them so that when they strike with their venom, they know exactly where to strike. They'll strike at the most vulnerable places, so they make sure that venom works and they really get the most bang for their buck, so to speak. So they can really perceive the world in a lot of different ways. And finally, the last of which we can't really even understand, right? We have 5 senses. They, in a sense, have a 6th. So here's how a rattlesnake eats. So these are some great pictures showing a rattlesnake will dislocate its lower jaw, in a sense, for us, so you can think of it in that way. It will make its jaw very, very large, and it'll swallow its prey whole, right? So it doesn't have any teeth that's actually used for chewing. So it swallows its food whole, and then its very strong digestive acids will break down that animal as it goes through its digestive tract. So you can see sometimes they eat rabbits, sometimes they eat lizards, sometimes they eat other snakes, and then sometimes they eat squirrels as well. So the way a rattlesnake is going to catch its prey is it's going to be sitting, right? It's going to be sitting kind of like in this position right here. It's going to be sitting real nice and short, ready to strike. And then all of a sudden, when it senses something's coming, it's going to bite real tough. And it'll bite and inject some venom into that animal. And it'll just inject usually as much venom as is needed for the kill, right? Because that venom that they create takes a lot of work to make. It's a combination of neurotoxins or hemotoxins, so either attacks the blood or it attacks the nerves. And to create something like that out in a dry environment takes a lot of energy. And so it wants to only use just as much venom as it needs to kill. And so it'll inject just enough venom through its large fangs at the top of its mouth and then retreat back to this position that you saw, right? And it'll just kind of wait there. It'll hang around there. And it'll sense in a few minutes that animal will scamper off and it'll die somewhere else. And that snake will come on over and then he'll go ahead and eat it like we saw in those pictures earlier. So rattlesnake venom is really neat. And I think it's important for us to realize that it's something that we don't need to be afraid of, because snakes are very reluctant to use that venom, like I mentioned. They'd rather use it on something that they can eat than something that they're just going to potentially protect themselves from, which is us. All right, so we're going to go ahead and go back to our slides. And let's look at, hold on, give me a second, guys. Let me share the screen with you guys. All right. So here we are at the next part of our rattlesnake presentation, and this is the rattlesnake rattle. So obviously it's called a rattlesnake rattle for a reason. Rattlesnake is called a rattlesnake for a reason because it's got that rattle at the end of the tail. So this is really, really neat, and it's something you can try at home. So try this out right now. Did you know a rattlesnake's rattle is actually made out of the same proteins that your fingernails are made out of? That's called keratin. So it's the same thing your hair is made out of. And on the rattlesnake, it's just layers and layers of keratin, as this picture shows, that are very tightly packed together. And those keratin layers, very tightly packed, are rubbed against each other or shaken by the snake on its tail region, and that produces the sound that we associate with the rattlesnake. So we're going to go ahead and listen to that, and then we're going to do a demonstration ourselves. So let me pull up the sound real quick, guys. It'll give me a second because it's pretty quiet on the computer. All right, so here we go. So what that is you can see it's those layers and layers of keratin that are rubbing back and forth against each other very, very quickly, producing that sound. So the faster that they move, the louder the sound becomes. So the end of a snake's tail, right here in this section, let me see if I can make this a little bigger for you guys. This section right here, these have some of the strongest muscles that scientists are aware of in any animal. So you can move this tail back and forth 50 times in 1 second. So that's incredibly powerful. Now, just for comparison, let's go ahead and try one of those experiments ourselves. So if you take out your fingers like this, put your fingernails just like that, and try to rub your fingernails together, right? Really, really fast. See if you can come up with a buzzing sound. I don't know if you can hear this, but certainly if you're doing this at home, you can hear that buzzing sound, right? Put it up to your ear, try to hear that buzzing sound. So that's essentially the same thing that a rattlesnake is doing, shaking those layers and layers of keratin back and forth against each other, making that sound. Now, we can't do that nearly as fast as they can. So the faster they do it, the louder that sound becomes. So our fingers are meant to move that fast, certainly. So we can't do it that loud. But it is a pretty cool little trick that we can do to kind of practice how they produce that sound. So when a rattlesnake is born, it is actually not born with a full set of rattles. It has just a little tiny thing at the end. Let's go back to the picture, called a button. And that's right here. Figure A right here. That's a little button. And so each time it sheds its skin, it's going to get a new segment on top of the other one. And a segment is one of these right here, these keratin layers. And eventually it sheds its skin a lot. It gets a whole bunch. And so we'll debunk some rattlesnake myths at the end of the program as well. All right. So let's move on to our, oh, here's a cool video that I wanted to show you guys as well. So this is a rattlesnake rattling. So hopefully you can see this. Give me a second to set it up. All right. So watch how that tail's moving back and forth so many times. I'll play it again. It's pretty hard for the camera even to pick up, right? Strong muscles. Right, so why does a rattlesnake do this? Why do rattlesnakes rattle in the first place, guys? Well, think about it. They do it as a means of self-protection. So over time, through evolution, they have evolved to know that when they have this rattle, they are better at being protected. They're less frequently eaten by other animals, because with that rattle, the animal that's attacking them, or in our case, humans, will associate that rattle with an animal with venom. So when they hear that rattle, the animal can go away, the rattlesnake can keep its venom. And it's kind of a win-win for both animals in this situation, because if the animal's smart, he's going to stay away from this creature because he doesn't have any purpose to get near him because he doesn't want to get bit. And remember, like I said, the venom is very hard to make. It's very labor intensive. So the rattlesnake wants to make sure it preserves its venom. You got a win-win on both sides. Okay, so here's a same video of that snake basking. So you can see it blends in really well with some of these granite rocks that we have here in SoCal. Back into that zoom in. So it's warning right now, right? Warning the viewer. Stay away from me. Right? You can see its typical habitat, kind of a coastal sage scrub there. All right, that is not at Lake Perris, by the way. All right, so we're going to talk about some of the rattlesnake imposters, the snakes that think that they want you to think that they're rattlesnakes, and that includes species such as the gopher snake. Those are the ones you see right here. So the one we have in Southern California is the San Diego gopher snake, at least in this part of Southern California. And this is a picture of two babies. These guys hatch in October. They grow about this big when they're little, and then they can get up to 6 or 7 feet long. So they can get really, really large. This snake is completely harmless. It eats rodents, it has no venom, doesn't have a rattle. It actually, though, wants you to think that it's a rattlesnake because it has co-evolved at a similar time with these rattlesnakes. And at the same time, this snake has evolved the behavior to mimic a rattlesnake when it feels threatened. So how does it do that? Well, I'm going to demonstrate it by this video next. So this is called Batesian mimicry. So essentially, you can see right here, he's going to blow his head up into a triangular shape, right, by air pockets that'll kind of fill up. Because gopher snakes typically have a oval-shaped head, and rattlesnakes have a triangle or diamond-shaped head. The gopher snake knows this, and so when it feels threatened, it's going to make it into a diamond shape. So the animal attacking it thinks, oh my goodness, it's a rattlesnake. I better stay away. But it does something else. It's going to get its tail, and it's going to hit it against the floor really, really quick to mimic the rattlesnake as well. So let's go ahead and take a video look at this. So this one, I think, is just him hissing first. All right, so here's him hissing. He's pretty mad. He's upset. It's curling up much like a rattlesnake would in a strike position. He's got that triangular shaped head. All right, and there it goes there. So let's see, I believe it's this video that has mimicry. All right, so watch the tail. I know it's kind of quiet. So you see that rubbing on the floor there. So again, a gopher snake does not have venom. It doesn't even have a rattle. But over time, it's learned that it can do very similar things as a rattlesnake in order to survive. Not a harmful snake in any way, but something that is co-evolved, all right, with a snake to mimic those behaviors. All right, so we're going to close up and we're going to look at some of the neat things that I have here today to show you guys. So when the museum opens up again, I invite you guys all to come up and come touch our rattlesnake skin that we have here. So this is actually a cousin of our rattlesnake. This is a western diamondback rattlesnake. This one has a little bit too much love. It's been ripped a little bit, so we'll be gentle with this when we come back. But as you can see, this is what a rattlesnake skin would look like. And we have that nice rattle at the end. You can see it right there. And that muscle area there. So that's our rattlesnake, what it would look like on a living snake. So the next thing I have is pretty cool as well. This is a shed rattlesnake skin. So rattlesnakes and all reptiles, they cannot produce skin like we do as we grow. They have to shed their skin in order to get new skin cells. So it doesn't just kind of happen like it does on mammals or on humans, where we grow them naturally. We don't even notice. For reptiles, they all come off at once. And so that's when you have something like this. So let's see if I can get the lighting a little bit better. So this is actually from the Lake Perris parking lot. You can see here, this is the bottom part. That's the stomach. Kind of, it's got a nice tire tread. You might want to say nature's tire tread. To help it rub up against the ground and to slither. And then the back, this is the scales, right? This is the back end of the scales. So I'll kind of put that up close. It's probably better if you see it from afar, actually. So that's the rattlesnake's shed skin. So when it's ready to grow. And remember, every time it sheds its skin, it gets a new what? It gets a new segment on its rattle. All right, and then I do have one more thing I wanted to show you guys. This is a rattlesnake juvenile, so a baby rattlesnake. This is a skeleton of it. So you can see right here, it has its fangs, and it's pretty hard to tell, but its fangs are actually tucked into the very top of its skull, on the roof of its mouth, and when it's ready to strike, those fangs will come out, and they will inject venom like this, and then that venom is stored in the top of their skull and venom glands, and that's what's going to be injected into whatever animal happens to be in its path. Most of the time, remember, once you use it on prey. All right, so let's go ahead and close up by talking about a few myths about rattlesnakes. So the first myth number one on these guys, okay? Are baby rattlesnakes more dangerous than adult rattlesnakes? Yes or no? Myth? What do you guys think? Well, you think about it for a minute. So it's actually true that adult rattlesnakes are more venomous. So one of our friends of Lake Perris, his name is Dr. Bill Hayes. He works at Loma Linda University. He has done actually kind of an environmental history of this, and he's looked at the idea of rattlesnake babies being more venomous than adult rattlesnakes is an idea that circulated in the LA Times in the 70s. So before that, there was no idea of that rattlesnakes were more dangerous as babies. And so it's kind of been an urban myth that's been passed on ever since. So the actual fact of the matter is the adults statistically are far more likely to harm and injure humans, and their venom is also a lot more powerful. So stay away from the adults more so than the babies. Obviously, the babies can bite as well, so we want to make sure we're careful there. But as far as the myth goes, the babies are not more dangerous than the adults. Okay, myth number two, I think is for every rattlesnake segment that you see on a rattle, that means how old it is, right? So you can see, so there's 1, 2, 3, 4 here. Maybe this rattlesnake is 4 years old. Well, by now you guys should know that that is false, because a rattlesnake, it sheds its skin, and every time it does that, right, it sheds this, it will get a new segment on that original button that forms the rattlesnake rattle. And so a common misconception is that you can count a rattlesnake's rattles and it'll tell you how old it is. No, that just tells you how many times it shed its skin, which can tell you maybe how healthy the environment is, how much food and how many resources it has in its environment, but not necessarily how many years it's been alive. Okay, so that's kind of another big thing that I think is a misconception. Finally, here's some rattlesnake safety, guys. If you're out on the trails, especially this time of year, especially the red diamond rattlesnake here in the low country, it's coming out March through May, and then again September through October tend to be the most busy months where we see these snakes. We get calls for snakes. Stay on the middle of trails. Don't wander off trail. That's important for a variety of reasons, but specifically for your safety. And if you do see a rattlesnake, so say you're crossing by and you do see the rattlesnake like this, usually they're on the end of the trails, by the way. They're not usually in the middle, they're on the sides, which is why you got to be careful with dogs as well, because dogs like to sniff the end of the trail, and that's where the snakes are, which is why most of our trails here at Lake Perris are not allowed for dogs. So the snake, though, if you see it like this or in any position, you go up to it, you see it, you slowly back away. Okay, turn back the other way, either find an alternative route around it or just go back to your car. Don't try to mess with it. Don't try to get sticks and shove it in its face and try to get away. Let it be at peace. Okay, so the reason I say be calm about it is because there are times when rattlesnakes will hibernate in groups. So rattlesnakes quasi-hibernate here in Southern California. And so what they do oftentimes is they'll actually hibernate together to stay warm. So they'll kind of create a ball of a whole bunch of snakes, you could say, that are all tangled together underneath some ground or some brush. And when it gets warmer, they all wake up and start going different directions. So if you see one snake this time of year, there is a chance there might be other ones nearby. So we don't want to panic. We don't want to start running and screaming, because it's going to scare the snake, but it's also could potentially get you in more trouble if you see other snakes going around. So just be calm around them. And then finally, this is one that I always think is really important for anyone who's a hiker or a camper, is to always look before you put your limb somewhere. So if I'm going to grab for something, I don't want to just make sure I'm looking this way and I grab, right? Because there could be a snake right here that I'm not looking at. I want to make visual contact with what I'm going to touch or put my foot or my feet or walk before I do that. A lot of hikers, I've heard this from friends, they're up in the mountains, right? They go over a log that's fallen. They don't look over the log before they put it there. There's a snake there and they see it, right? Some of our calls for service in state parks come for when people are in parks and they don't see a snake. They're reaching for something. Maybe they're camping. Snakes like the heat of your fire pit, right, on a campfire. So they're going to be attracted to it. You don't see where you're putting your hand and boom, there's a snake there. That's how you can get bit. Okay, so make sure you are always making visual contact with your surroundings and being situationally aware in snake country. So I hope this video, this little short documentary, helped to maybe inspire you to love snakes a little bit more, or if nothing else, maybe why we shouldn't be afraid of them. That by understanding their adaptations, what their needs are, and what their behaviors are, we can come to understand this species as something that's vitally important in maintaining the population of rodents and other small species in our parks and our ecosystems, but also as animals that I think are quite wonderful and that we can certainly learn a lot from. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, make sure you like, comment, subscribe. Send this to all your friends. Get the word out. Lake Perris wants to keep producing these virtual media presentations. Please leave comments with any questions. We'll get back to them. I'll drop my email in the comments area or in the video tab as well, so you can email me directly any questions if you have. Again, guys, like to thank you for your time. Be safe out there. All right?